seminar is being sponsored by the Department of Energy Resources Engineering and the Stanford Energy Club and the GSP Energy Club have all collaborated together to do this. Just a little bit of background about this. Unless you've been in a coma for the last couple of years, I don't think you can help but have heard about fracking. It's on the TV, it's in the newspapers and everything. It's a controversial subject. It's not that it has to be, but it's turned into be that sort of a subject. And everybody has an interest in this thing. People who are concerned about having more energy available, more clean energy available, are interested in this subject. Landowners are interested in it because it happens on their property and it might affect their health, their safety, their value of their land, so they have a stake in it. Government, politicians have an interest in this sort of thing. Everybody has something to say about this subject. These meetings that we're having, this meeting that we're replicating today is being held all over the country right now as we speak. And lots of little towns and big towns all over the United States are having these conversations. I've been to a few of these, and generally I'll have to say that they aren't very productive. Usually my experience has been it's a bunch of people shouting at each other, and nobody actually takes the time to listen. So what we're going to try to do today is with Nancy's help, we're going to try to lay out the facts as best as we can. Let everybody have a say, let everybody talk about their position, and maybe get a chance to sort out, fact and fiction if that's possible. I don't think the Town Council of West Colorado is going to be able to make a decision tonight, but what they are expecting is to get input from you to help them make a decision about whether or not to have fracking in their little town in Colorado. So I'll introduce Nancy, who will start us out. So it's my great pleasure to have my friend Nancy Sauer. They're from Houston, Texas. Nancy is a adjunct professor at the business school at Rice University and also at the University of Oklahoma. She's been involved in government work. Her areas of specialty are public policy and government work, and especially government relations between the industry and the various governmental bodies. She's done this seminar before, and so we're trying it again tonight. I think it's going to be fun. It's completely unscripted. It hasn't been rehearsed, that's for sure. And so everybody should just sit back and enjoy themselves and get involved in the conversation. If we have time, we're going to have 20 different presentations tonight, short ones. And if we have time at the end, the people in the audience can certainly ask questions if they want. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Nancy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to see all of you here. It's a real privilege to be on this gorgeous campus and to enjoy this beautiful weather. And I want to thank Warren for his kindness in inviting me, and for my friend Alan, who has known Warren since they were at the University of Oklahoma together many years ago. So thank you so much, Warren. I know there's been a lot of work to get us to this point. And Karen, what a delight to meet you, and thank you for participating. What I wanted to do is tee this up a little bit. When I do this simulation at the University of Oklahoma, most of the class is actually working in the energy industry. They're familiar with the issues and they kind of get rolling pretty quickly. Here, what I'm aware of, and also at Rice, is I have a number of foreign students who really aren't that familiar with the way policy is created in the United States. So I wanted to be sensitive to those of you that may not be familiar with the policy process and go over just a little bit of how we in this country engage stakeholders. And if you'll just give me a few minutes, I wanted to tee up the town hall and talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement. You hear that term a lot these days. And we're living in a time of activism, and everybody has a cause. And so how do you, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of business, because that's where I've spent most of my career, 30 years in the energy industry, talking to governments, explaining what we do, trying to answer concerns, trying to create relationships with communities that range from Indian tribes to small towns to large cities. So how do you create some credibility? And one of the reasons why I'm focusing on industry right now, but the same presentation could be made for advocacy groups that represent environmental causes or any other thing, is because at the end of the town hall, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick vote. and we're going to pretend, like all of us, are advising a business about whether or not to invest in West. Based on what you've heard today at the hearing, would you advise your management at an energy company to go forward with a development program in West Colorado? So as we hear the testimony, be thinking about that. But just very quickly, I want to run through just a little bit of information that might get us all on the same level playing field. When you talk about engaging the world, there's this world out there that's engaged, we all know about it, and we're all connected, and we're all talking in our own communities. And there's information that we have that's in our own communities that may not be shared equally. Okay, so that's one of the first challenges in this whole stakeholder engagement game, is how do we begin to make decisions, especially if you're government, dealing with the most factual, the most accurate science that's out there, and dealing with the real facts of the community. But then, once you're kind of over that hurdle, the issue is how do you engage with that world? And that's the biggest problem that industry has right now, is the oil and gas industry does a great job of the technology side of the biz, but they do a really poor job of relating to the communities. They're learning, but in the past we've really been hindered by this weakness in our ability to create relationships. And then finally, how do we see stakeholders? So really quickly, now everything that's local is global, and everything that's global is local. And today, there are going to be people that are discussing this issue in Germany, in England, and what happens in some of these small communities, they can pull up and they can watch, and they can then listen to the science that's being presented and challenge their own governments and their own industries if the science is presented differently. And so that really puts a whole different twist on the game. The other thing that I think is really important to understand about the industry side of this is the upstream oil and gas industry. Those companies that explore for and develop and produce oil and gas, they are a business-to-business model. They operate on that model. They're all about going after the resource. They're all about the science. They're all about the technology. Everything in those companies is focused on getting that resource out of the ground and into a pipeline. But the crazy thing and the challenging thing is that they have to have a social license to operate. That's their permit. That's their ability to have access to minerals in the United States. And the way we get a social license to operate, in this country at least, is through town hall meetings like this, where governmental bodies decide whether a company gets that permit or not. And the regulatory agency is ultimately often in that role. And so the problem is you're dealing with a company that's all about a commodity, and they're going after the resource, and they could care less about the demographics out there. But when it comes to getting your SLO, your social license to operate, you have to be thinking about, how does this community think about me? Have we proved ourselves to be a trustworthy player in this community? Do we have legitimacy? Do we have staying power? Would a city want to do business with us over the long term? What is our history of working with other cities? And so in that case, you're operating more like a consumer products company. You're operating more like Apple, because that is a business to consumer model. And so if you keep those two models in mind, you can kind of understand why the energy industry has had such a challenge in communicating effectively with the public. It's two completely different skill sets, okay? So just very quickly, right now we engage stakeholders, we're proactive, we deal with activists, usually in a reactive way, and we support community life through corporate social responsibility, and that's really an external focus, and most energy companies think of those functions as non-core. That's not essential to their everyday operations. Now that is beginning to change, and that's the positive, and we're going to hear from a CEO of an energy business today. And so listen for these themes. And in that, this social license to operate, and what this city of West is really considering is, are we going to create any hindrances to development? And they're going to evaluate their legal options for doing that. But the other thing that they're evaluating is, do we even want this activity in our community? And then they're going to have to consider, do we have the legal ability to restrict it? And so all those things, as you know, are going on all at once. But in this social license to operate, it's your access to minerals. If you're on federal lands, you've got to go through the federal government to get access. If you're not on federal lands, you may have to go through some sort of state process. It's the approval of your drilling and production plan, your production permits, your environmental permits, your pipeline right-of-ways, your fees, your taxes, how all this is enforced, and finally, what sort of incentives, refunds, and credits the federal government or the state government may give you for this activity, to encourage this activity or to discourage the activity. So it used to be that the energy company was out of sight and out of mind, and nobody really knew what we were doing. They didn't know if we were spilling stuff, if we were cleaning it up, if it was good or bad or indifferent, because it was on somebody's back 40, and it was in a remote part of the country. And now, with hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, we're in sight, in mind all the time. And that's really why West is having this town hearing today. And right now, it's all about relationship. How are you going to create a relationship with that community? And you get your social license to operate because you have a legitimate relationship that's proved up over time by your performance. And this was a great quote by Pierre Lassonde, who's the former president of Newmont Mining Corporation. And Newmont actually acquired a significant amount of their minerals from the old Pennzoil Company. But he said, you don't get your social license by going to a government ministry and making an application or simply paying a fee. It requires far more money to truly become part of the communities in which you operate. And I'm just going to flip through a little bit more. Another example to think about is Keystone Pipeline. They played by the rules. They did that sort of linear technical thought. And they did all of their studies, they had all of their processes, they had all of their permits, but they underestimated the ability of the industry to work around delays on the permitting of the pipeline, and then they allowed stakeholders to begin controlling the agenda, and so what we've got is no pipeline. And this is what I really wanted you to understand, what this city of West is focused on, is West has really three options here. They can oppose a ban, they can be neutral on fracking, and they can kind of just watch the industry, or they can be supportive and partner with you. And those are really kind of the three roles that any of us can play in this game. And I would say to an industry person, what you really want to focus on is making sure that the government and the activists, for example, are neutral or supportive. You know, you don't want them opposed if you want to have a successful program. And so you want to be in that yellow area. And the greatest recent example that I can think of a company that really did not understand this relationship game it was Norway's Norse Energy Corp. They went into New York, they spent about $100 million, they leased 100,000 acres, and then New York banned fracking. And all of that leasing and all of that investment was hostage to the New York Assembly. They went into bankruptcy as a result of this, and they're still involved in ongoing litigation. So that's the worst case. But then you can have a best case where you've got some community, and it may be West, we'll find out today, where it's frack baby frack. And bumper stickers are on the pickup trucks in town, and people are excited because there's lots of folks that are going to become millionaires. But that frack baby frack can turn into a story like the 60-minute story on the Shaleionaires, where all of a sudden one property owner, and we're going to see this today, is opposed to another property owner because one has minerals and the other doesn't. And one's going to make a lot of money and the other's going to make no money and pay a lot of community costs in terms of quality of life. And so this is the sort of thing that city councils have to balance. And they have to balance it in times when sometimes they're up for re-election, as is the case in West. Two of us up here are up for re-election in November of 2014. And so as you're listening to the kind of questions that we ask, I'm up for re-election, and Kieran is going to be up for re-election. So what would our interest be in this hearing? In addition to listening and making a decision on fracking, but what's going through our mind? Anybody?
Getting re-elected.
Alec.
Yeah, you want to get re-elected, you want the people in West to like you.
What state is this in?
Colorado. It's Colorado, absolutely. So that's really important. And you know, the really question, the significant question, whether you're a representative of an environmental group, an Indian tribe, a union, how do you engage the hearts and minds around your business or your cause? How do you do that? Do you do it with bad science? Do you do it with good science? Do you do it with science at all? Do you do it with emotion? Do you do it with personal relationships? That's what you all have to decide in this situation with West. And I'm just going to also say that what we're going to hear tonight probably is some logical outrage about industry's performance in certain areas. And one of the problems the energy industry has, and I'll flip back to this slide, is we're really stratified. We have an upstream industry, which is exploration and development and production. We have a midstream, which is pipelines. We have a downstream, which is refining. And then you've got another industry, which is utilities. And then you've got another, which is really renewables and alternatives. But the public looks at the whole thing and says that's the energy business. But that's not how we see our business. We see our business as being completely different types of enterprises. And we don't talk to each other often. So when one of us makes a mistake, all of us are labeled with that reputation. The consumer or the voter sees us as monolithic with the exception of alternatives and renewables. And the alternatives and renewables industry has been very successful in branding themselves with a green and a progressive and a sensitive, responsive, relational brand. And that's one of the reasons why they've been so successful in the public affairs space. Because they're a commodity just like that at the other side of the chart, but they've branded themselves in significant ways. So there's logical outrage about all the things that we know go on when there's disasters, but then there's illogical outrage, and you may hear some of that today. And the illogical outrage is that the public gets enormously upset when the price of gasoline increases. And these prices were relevant 3 months ago in Houston. Houston, you could buy a gallon of gasoline from $2.89 to $3.34. You could buy a gallon of milk for $4, and you could buy an equivalent gallon of bottled water for $10. When the price of milk or bottled water goes up, nobody says anything. But when the price of energy goes up, there's an awful lot of consternation. And so how does the government or an industry respond to both the logical and illogical outrage? And then I'm just going to wrap up with some observations from the former president of Shell Oil Company. He wrote a book after spending about 18 months covering the country and talking to stakeholders, just like what we're going to hear tonight. And he wrote a book called Why We Hate the Oil Companies. And what he found was the American public said they hate oil companies because they're independent, they're introverted, they're arrogant, they have a lack of transparency, they're poor communicators, they're unemotional, they're locked in a paradigm, and they're powerful. We hate that. We just hate that. They hold all the cards, and they keep things close to their vest. And I would just throw out to you all that one of the reasons they do that is they are in a business-to-business mindset. And they're all about going after that resource. And they're constrained often by their legal counsel who are advising them to be as quiet as possible. And so even if they wanted to talk, often their spokesmen and spokeswomen and spokespeople can't talk. And so there's some things to really understand about what constrains them as well. But there's also ample room for some criticism. So we're starting to engage, and the outside world is advocating for all sorts of things based on all kinds of science. There's secrecy outrage out there, which is why there's a website called Frac Focus that will give you information about the downhole chemicals that are being used in these wells. And it's all because there's some outrage in these communities because people have asked for that chemical information and they have not felt that the companies have been forthcoming. And so they have gone to their legislatures and they've gone to their elected officials and they have demanded this information. Okay, there's also all over the world, we see this, particularly in the Ukraine right now, a real cry for freedom, but the city of West is saying, you know what, we want the freedom to be able to ban or issue a moratorium on fracking if we want to. And we don't like the idea of the state coming in here and saying we can't do it. And if you're the state of Colorado coming in and saying you can't do it, you better figure out a way to say that so that it doesn't wind up in litigation, because that's what will slow down everything. And then you've got an awful lot of places that are talking about independence and corruption and economic failure and disaster and crisis and human suffering and government failure and chaos and anarchy and specialized interest. But at the end of the day, when we look at some of this activism, what we see are people envisioning a better world. And that's the real positive thing right here, and that's what we're going to go to, is people are beginning to talk about what cities can be. And for those of you all that are from China, for example, you're creating cities overnight, and you're envisioning the city of the future. It's very exciting, and it's very positive, and you're envisioning green cities, just like we are here. But at the end of the day, also, there's a lot of cost fatigue, and you're going to see that probably in the town hearing too. So just in closing, I want to say that 14 years ago, Sir John Brown, who is the CEO of BP, came to Stanford, and he gave one of the most significant speeches that an oil company CEO has ever delivered. And he launched Stanford's climate change, BP's climate change initiative here at Stanford. And in this speech, he did something quite unusual. For the first time, an energy company CEO came out and said, we don't see all the science that supports climate change. But what we do see is there is sufficient concern among the public for us to begin to work and act and listen in this space. And what he said specifically is, those are wide margins of error, and he was referring to the climate change science at the time. But it would be unwise and potentially dangerous to ignore the mounting concern. The time to consider the policy dimensions of climate change is not when the link between greenhouse gases and climate change is conclusively proven, but when the possibility cannot be discounted and is taken seriously by the society of which we are a part. And that's one of the things that those of you all that are going to be dealing in science today in these hearings, that's one of the things that we're going to be thinking about on City Council is, what is the truth about the science, and when should we act and when should we refrain from acting because we just don't have answers. And this comment was mocked by some in the industry. They said that BP stood for beyond petroleum or beyond politics, but it really represented a change in an attitude. And then I'm just going to quickly get to the end of my comments here and mention that there are some perils that are out there when you begin to make friends in unusual places. Chesapeake discovered that when they teamed up with the Sierra Club, and they discovered that they could write a check to the Sierra Club and help fund some of their activity, but then when they got a new CEO, the Sierra Club didn't feel that they should be taking money from the fossil fuel industry. So you get into some interesting relationships when you start working in these town halls. So here we are now in West Colorado, and we're considering the question of whether we frac or we do not frac. And so the purpose of this town hall is to look at increased energy development in the area. One thing that's important to know is West is an island in a sea of activity north of us. The Niobrara Shale, and I'm going to show you the map in a minute, goes across the boundaries of 3 different states. And it dips down into the area of West, and it would include all of the subsurface underneath West. We are beginning to realize here on City Council that energy companies are very quietly and surreptitiously leasing minerals from people that have minerals in West. And some of these companies are beginning to ask questions of us here on City Council and some of the members of city staff about our plans for regulating oil and gas. So they're making their plans. They see no existing regulation in the city of West, and so they're beginning to think that it's all systems are go. We're beginning to get questions from our citizens, from people that are getting visits from landmen that want to lease their minerals, and from next door neighbors who haven't received visits from landmen and are wondering if they'll come. And then we're also observing the fact that cities on the Front Range of the Colorado Rockies are banning and issuing moratoria that are winding up in court in California. And so we're wondering, what our rights really are in that area. So we're soliciting your public opinion on whether we should move forward with a hydraulic fracturing ban. We are not going to vote on this today. We're just receiving information from the public. Can we ban? We're hopeful that those of you that are representing the state will speak to this issue, and I'm sure you will, but we have a state constitution, we have a state oil and gas conservation act, which essentially tells local governments they can't hinder oil and gas development, but it also gives local governments the opportunity to have extremely expansive land use planning requirements. And Boulder County, the city of Boulder, Broomfield and Greeley, Lafayette, Longmont, Fort Collins, and even the city of London has a proposal. All of these communities have attempted to ban or issue moratoria on hydraulic fracturing. So here's the procedure. We have some index cards that Councilman Court has, I think, sent around. And what I need for you to do, if you plan to testify, is you need to write your name, your affiliation, your address, your phone number, your email address, and your position on the proposed ban. We're going to take all those that are neutral, all those that are opposed, and all those that are in favor in groups, so that we hear from each position as a group. And then we will be calling you by name to come up. You will have 3 minutes to deliver your testimony. We will absolutely cut you off after 3 minutes, so do not go over your appointed time. And I have attempted to cluster those that we know we're planning to testify. I understand there may be some changes, so if we need to make those, we'll make that accommodation when we get your cards in. And let me introduce to you very quickly the panel. We have to my left Councilman Alan Livingston. Mr. Livingston, would you please tell the public here your background in oil and gas, so any special interests are not concealed?
Realistically, I am in the oil business. I've been in the oil business for 40 years from Houston, Texas, and I have worked in public affairs. At one time, though, I have to be very frank and say I was a member of the Sierra Club. I've been an activist in a lot of areas that you don't find traditional oil and gas people involved in. I've also been a spokesman for the oil industry on a number of occasions on certain issues. So it's a very divided background, but I'm a small independent producer and have been for 40, 50 years.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Conde. My background is also in the oil and gas industry, but more on the technology side. I also care very deeply about the environment, and I'm a longtime resident of West. And myself and my family, we really enjoy the outdoors and all the outdoor adventures that living in Colorado provides. So I'm interested in preserving that beautiful environment that we have in Colorado. But I also have a strong technology background in the oil and gas industry. And so I'm also interested in what these projects can do for our local economy and for our businesses. So I'm very interested in public opinion on the subject today.
So I'm Warren Court, and I was going to say that I was an oil man too, but since there's so many of them on the city council already, I think we need a little balance. So I'm a local business owner. I have a small manufacturing company, and I'm formerly from Denver, and my wife and I wanted to move away from the big city and have a more rural experience, which West offered us. And we have a nice piece of property near town, and we enjoy living in the wide open spaces, but I'm sort of on both sides of the fence. I'm interested in good quality of living, but I also have a business to run and people to employ. I'm also playing the role tonight, as we had substitution, of the CEO of the Arapaho Nation, which has a reservation nearby, and several of our tribe members live in the property. So I'll be speaking for both people.
As your mayor, I just wanted to remind the community that we've seen booms before in this area. There was a California gold rush, and that left us with a developed San Francisco and steamships and railroads and Levi Strauss, which made blue jeans for the miners, and ghost towns and property rights and pollution. And in 1855, Arapaho County, in which we reside here, was the first county in Colorado. And in 1858, gold was found on the South Platte River in Arapaho County. So we were the first county in Colorado to begin mining gold. And between 1858 and 1861, and I would like for the public to focus on how short these booms last, between that period of time, we had Pikes Peak gold rush. And the folks that rushed out to make their fortune in gold were known as 59ers. 100,000 of them came out in Colorado. But they're coming again. They were 59ers the first time, and now they're called frackers. And we know what this looks like because we've seen this in communities around West. There's lots of trucks. There can be a lot of pads. And our county is kind of an unusual place. We're called West, even though we're in eastern Colorado. We're West because we were the most far westerly point when the settlers began moving west. And unlike places that people associate with in Colorado, our topography is a little flatter, looks a little bit more like Kansas. There's not as many resorts that are interested in setting up operations in West. But we do have beautiful farmland, beautiful ranching and land, which we really, really value and which we desire to preserve. So we were established in 1875. We have 14,000 citizens, 3,000 of whom commute into Denver every day. We have light industrial, farming and ranching. We have a wonderful biofuels company that's just located to West. We have aspirations to build a retirement community here. We have healthcare demands in the community. We're very excited about our Native American heritage, which we hope to develop with a grant from the state, develop a Native American Arapaho learning center. We have tremendous fly fishing and hunting, and we also are beginning to experience an uptick in oil field support businesses that are supporting oil field development outside of West. So here are the things that we're focused on, and when you speak today during your testimony, we'd appreciate it if you have any thoughts on infrastructure improvements, tax base diversification, and population growth. Those are the things that this City Council has been struggling with up to this point. And we also would like to let you know that the challenge is we want to protect the health and safety of our citizens while also creating the most possible opportunity for them. When we do see that fracking holds abundant opportunity, but it must be properly regulated, and we want to manage the rapid growth. And some of our concerns, which we've heard to this point from our citizens, are pollution. This was a picture that was taken in Colorado after the floods of last summer. The man camps that are often established during rapid development. The traffic, which will tear up our roads and change our downtown. Safety, when you've got drilling activity in neighborhoods. Water, how disposal pits are managed. Property values, we've got folks that have moved out here for the kind of lifestyle it can provide for their families, and they want to make sure that those property values increase. And economic growth. We want to make sure that kids that grow up in West might have an opportunity to stay here because there's jobs here. And so on that point, I'd like to begin to call up those that, and let me go back to our list of folks testifying. If you could turn in the cards, I'll ask Councilman Court to please pick those up, and we will immediately.
I think when people come, shall they come to the podium?
Yes, that would be terrific. I'm in the neutral position. I'd first like to hear from the West City Attorney, Greer Maccabee. And Greer, you're going to have 3 minutes, and we will signal to you. Come on up here to the podium, please. And we will let you know when your 3 minutes are up.
Yeah.
Hit the timer. Okay, Mr. Maccabee, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Greer Maccabee, attorney for the City of West. I come today not to offer an opinion on whether or not West should ban fracking, but instead to provide guidance on if and how regulations can be imposed. In Colorado, questions about the scope of local authority over fracking and what mechanisms local governments can use to regulate fracking remain largely unanswered. While the State Oil and Gas Commission regulates oil and gas activities, including drilling, county and municipal governments in Colorado have broad authority to further regulate and control such activity. The catch? These regulations cannot conflict with state rules. It remains clear under this framework that any outright bans on oil and gas development at large would be operationally preempted and wouldn't stand judicial review. However, here it's important to distinguish between hydraulic fracturing important to distinguish between a ban on development and a ban on hydraulic fracturing. A ban on specific hydraulic fracturing techniques would prohibit only a certain practice used by oil and gas developers and not oil and gas development by itself. Notably, the State Oil and Gas Commission does not today specifically regulate fracking, allowing localities to fill this void. So long as conventional oil and gas plays could proceed unimpeded under any ordinance passed, there's a strong likelihood and strong argument to be made that such an ordinance would withstand legal challenge. As an additional strategy, West may be able to regulate fracking by passing flexible land use-based ordinances that target the boom's socioeconomic consequences, rather than its environmental impacts. Existing Colorado law and the experiences of other cities near West reveal that these land use-based ordinances that target socioeconomic consequences but leave environmental regulation to the state are likely to prevail in court. In summary, should West decide to regulate fracking, it should proceed through land use-based ordinances. Outright bans on oil and gas development are operationally preempted under the current legal framework, but a ban on specific techniques, such as hydrofracking, may be upheld in court. Additionally, local regulations governing socioeconomic impacts of fracking may be an alternative strategy likely to survive judicial scrutiny. Thank you.
Wonderful. And if you would remain standing, let me see if we have any questions from the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. McAfee. Can you also give us some estimates of if this was challenged by the state, how much the litigation would cost the city?
That's hard to say and would depend on, I would say, the number of degrees the legal system would go up if it made it all the way up to the Colorado Supreme Court. Talking about several years possibly of litigation that the city would have to deal with, so that could potentially be expensive.
Any other questions from council?
Yes. Have these cities that have imposed some type of restrictions, have they all been similar in nature as to wording, as to particular type of approach that they went in their regulation, or have they been under different auspices, different concepts?
Some municipalities have taken slightly differing approaches, but among those, the ones that are most likely to withstand state judicial challenge are the ones that are based on land use approaches that do not outright ban fracking, but ban certain conditions that would then play out if fracking were to begin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Our next witness, or not witness, but next testifier is Arapahoe County Supervisor Caleb Morse.
She's being played by somebody else, but
Oh,
part of it.
welcome. Thank you. Let me get your slide teed up. Let me start.
Oh yeah, hi. So I'm Yishan. I'm the representative of the county supervisor. Actually, I'm in the neutral position that I'm really not very certain about whether to conduct this project or not. I think the good thing for the hydraulic fracturing project is our county can collect fees and taxes because more laborers and workers will move into this West City, and also the retails and the supporting business for this energy industry will be increasing in the city. So we will collect more money from that. However, I still have several concerns. So the first, the construction of this operation, like the drilling, may have the impact on the road damage. So it needs certain amount of effort and money to maintain the road. Also, such maintaining and the increasing amount of the large vehicles like the trucks will cause a traffic jam. It will be a big problem, especially for almost half of the adult citizens who commute into the Denver area. So I think long-term planning to support this infrastructure, like building more roads and more bridges, is a priority. And also, third, I have the concerns about the water use. Because the certain amounts of the water initially used for the agriculture may move to the operations. which may cause a shortage of the water for the ranching and farming, which is a major industry in the West City. And also there will be a potential underground water contamination caused by the operation of the leakage of the gas into the water. So, therefore, my opinion is I'm not certain about this project unless a long-term planning to support the infrastructure and the water use is made. And also, some certain research can prove that the water pollution is within an acceptable range. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you observing our time constraints, council.
They're doing really, by the way, all speakers are doing really well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, have you had any contact with any representatives of either the drilling companies or the oil companies in discussing any of these future aspects about traffic congestion, about water use, demands, need, timetables, money issues? Have there been initiated by either side any contacts at this point in time?
Yes, actually I did. So we made some discussion about where to get our water and also about this transportation. So now I think we still are working on this problem. We need a long term because, so there will maybe large trucks moving to this city and also there is maintaining of the roads going on there. So it still needs a long term to plan for it. So we cannot have a quick decision that whether to conduct it or not.
Would you keep the council informed as to the progress in these negotiations? I think that you have a working relationship is extremely important.
Oh yeah, yes. I think we will keep in touch and keep in discussion about this.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So in your discussions with the energy company, have they been willing to share some of the costs for these impacts that result from their oil and gas drilling? So it doesn't come out of we don't have to raise taxes, or it doesn't come out of our city budget?
So actually not really. So yes, I think for my expectation, the tax will be still increasing because the neighbors are coming to the city.
I have a question about the county's long-range planning process. We have participated, and we thank you very much for encouraging our participation. And we didn't anticipate this kind of energy production when we were looking at our road building program. Do you anticipate the increased tax revenues will pay for those infrastructure repairs, or do you see a county fee being applied for that purpose?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, we also thought about this. So we think the increasing of the tax may compensate for this infrastructure. Yes, but we don't know yet, actually, yeah.
So that's an uncertainty.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the time to inform us.
Thank you.
The Deputy Colorado State AG, Hunter Ellis.
My name is Hunter Ellis, and I'm the Deputy State Attorney for Colorado. The state maintains that municipalities cannot ban fracking, and therefore the West City Council should reject any such proposal. Over and over again in its history, the Colorado Supreme Court has invalidated both city and county ordinances that have sought to ban fracking. So why has the Colorado Supreme Court been so clear and unequivocal in opposing city and county ordinances in the land use context? Well, first, an outright ban deprives city residents of their constitutionally protected private property rights pursuant to the Fifth Amendment. An outright ban would expose West to substantial liabilities through regulatory takings lawsuits if the city does not justify or justly compensate property owners. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, an outright ban would be preempted or superseded by state laws regulating oil and gas. Long ago, the Colorado legislature created an extensive framework for administering oil and gas regulations throughout the state. In the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Act, the legislature granted the COGCC the ultimate right to regulate in the oil and gas context. The rationale behind the establishment of this legislative scheme was that if each individual city or county could regulate its own oil and gas laws independently, it would result in a patchwork and varying and inconsistent guidelines throughout the state. Given the state level legislative scheme already in place, local jurisdictions in Colorado cannot impose, or local jurisdiction in Colorado cannot impose a total ban on oil and gas development. Municipalities are inherently creations of the state, and therefore only have as much authority as the state has delegated to them. This is known as Dillon's rule. Here, the state believes that a ban on fracking is outside the scope of West's authority and would impair the ability of the COGCC to fulfill its statutory mandate. The state has dedicated substantial resources in the past to suing cities that overstep their boundaries, and will continue to do so going forward. I would therefore urge the West City Council to reject the fracking ban proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis. I have a question, and that is, we see a number of communities around us that have passed bans or moratoria. How does the state differentiate between a ban and a moratoria? What would the definition be that would?
Well, it depends on the specific guideline that they passed or ordinance that they passed. We've seen a number of different, it's very specific down to whether it's a noise ordinance, or whether it's a setback ordinance, or whether it has to do with the visual mitigation issue. So it really depends on that, and then we go to evidentiary hearing to have a court determine how to take it further. But we'll be devoting resources to challenge any sort of ordinance.
My concern as mayors, we certainly don't want to get crosswise with the state, but if there are concerns that our citizens have that haven't been addressed adequately, one of the options on the table for us is a moratorium. And so would you view a moratorium in the same light that you would view a ban, and would you litigate over a moratorium, or would we have some time to get the information that we needed?
I think I have to consult with my office on that, but I think we would challenge a moratorium. It depends on specific cracks in the ground, but I'm pretty sure we would challenge the moratorium as well.
We would like to work with, if we're not satisfied with the information that we receive, we do like to reserve our right for land use and zoning restrictions as our community sees. But thank you very much for your comments. Any other questions?
You asked my question. I'm not aware that you have actually litigated against any other town or municipality yet with respect to the fracking ban. Do we have plans to do so?
We do. We devoted resources to the issue, and we will pursue legal means with cities.
You know, our Council Greeley, actually, in their case, they passed a fracking ban in '85, and it went to the state Supreme Court, and the city had to pay substantial damages to the state for legal fees. And I'm very concerned about that, actually, given our financial situation. Any other? Is that a threat? Okay, thank you very much. Did I see a hand up in the community? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct you. The review ordinance from 1985 was a ban on oil and gas development. And so the Lost Long Brothers cases that you referenced actually dealt with outright bans on development altogether, which are not to be referenced, not bans on fracking specifically.
Excellent, excellent, fabulous work. Thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, our next individual would be Mr. Skinner with the California Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Ms. Skinner, I apologize.
I haven't had time for the sex change to go through.
I apologize for that. Nice to see you. Okay, let me give you your 3 minutes. We do appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me in from Denver. It's good to be here on behalf of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So I want to first outline the position of the COGCC. In general, the COGCC is in support of responsible development of natural resources in this state. We want to ensure that there's compliance with the regulatory standards and framework that's laid out by our state government, ensuring that standards are met on safety, water, environment, health, and welfare within that prescribed legal framework. We believe that the best outcomes occur when we're able to work closely with the companies, with the government, with other regulatory bodies, and with the community. A good outcome today would be a commitment to following our framework and trusting in the experience and the decision-making process laid out within the COGCC team. A little bit of background on the COGCC. We're a state regulatory body that's been created by the Colorado General Assembly to promote the development of oil and gas throughout the state, and it must be consistent with that protection of public health, safety, and welfare. We've been managing this process for decades, and we've got extensive experience. And we have a high standard for public disclosure. You mentioned earlier how we've got the Frac Focus website, so we've been working with companies and communities to improve the transparency. Whenever a project comes forward, whenever there's a proposal for a new building, our team is there to make sure that the location assessments are completed, that the impact minimization is completed, and that all the things are lined up before an approval would be granted. At the COGCC, we often get asked why we don't stop more developments or why we don't do more for the surface rights holders. And in response to that, I would say that within the COGCC, we're not here to represent the rights of one versus the other. We're here to uphold the regulatory framework, and the framework of the state of Colorado indicates that within reason, as long as there's nothing egregious going on, the project should be approved as long as they meet the guidelines. And that's what my team does diligently every day, is to ensure that those standards are upheld. There was a point raised earlier about water pollution, and we have extensive experience with that. And what we would say is that there are extensive tests that occur, and our teams are monitoring. You'll hear from one of our engineers shortly. And that we generally find that the water table is significantly separated by bedrock of about 5,000 feet. And so generally that hasn't been a concern in the past. So in summary, the COGCC's authority is to prevent and to mitigate significant environmental harm, but that does not negate our obligation to encourage development in the oil and gas resource industry, as long as it's done responsibly.
I believe time is up. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Skinner. And do we have any other questions?
Yes, Ms. Skinner. When we had the floods in Colorado and there was a lot of environmental problems, what was the COGCC's role in trying to mitigate that before it happened, and then afterwards, how did you handle that?
Within the COGCC, we're only as good as our processes and our frameworks, but in the resource industry, there's always going to be large-scale risks. And so that was an unfortunate instance where all of the standards and processes were followed, but there were some unforeseen factors. And so what we've done is our team has taken that experience and tried to learn from it and improve the standards going forward to improve overall public safety.
Ms. Skinner, with all this massive amount of new drilling that's going on north of us in Adams County and Weld County, I wonder, are you guys adequately staffed to regulate all this and inspect and everything?
We've got very experienced team members, and those team members, some of them have extensive backgrounds within the oil and gas sector, others have extensive backgrounds in public policy and environmental standards. And so I'd always love to expand my team, but right now we feel equipped for the next few years, and we're continuing to talk with the governing bodies to improve our budget as the development occurs in the state.
And I have one question, and that would be, how might we work with you as we begin to experience development in our area and see problems that we don't think the regulations address? What would be the best on-ramp in which we could raise those concerns with you all in hopes that you might regulate?
So we view ourselves as an important resource for information, and that goes both directions. And so if you have questions that are outside of your experience and expertise, we're happy to work with you to try and find the right answers. And then we also encourage the regulatory an ongoing dialogue, and when there are issues in gaps that haven't been addressed, we're open to either addressing them within our framework or elevating them up to the General Assembly if we are able to do them within the current boundaries.
Thank you very much.
Yes, as this issue becomes more public involvement, are you seeing a greater involvement by the legislature in trying to reshape your regulations or reshape your authority or restructure your authority? Is that occurring at this point in time?
I would say the legislature in general has been satisfied with the role that we're doing in terms of upholding the standards that they bring forward, but by the very nature of the technology in this industry and the scale and speed of development, there is ongoing change, and so this regulatory environment is fairly stable, but it's not set in stone. So it's iterative, and as things change at a regulatory level or at a technological level, our team is constantly keeping up with that to make sure that we're upholding the best safety standards we possibly can.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. Mr. Walker. We appreciate you coming in. And
Well, sure thing. I'm going to follow up what my boss did a great job of laying out for you. I'm glad she was able to answer more of these high-level questions. Because most of those things are above me. What I want to do is kind of bring this down a little bit to a level that the good people of this town can understand. I grew up not far from here on a ranch in Arapahoe County. I love the great outdoors. I love Colorado. And the last thing I would ever want to happen is something that would harm Colorado and harm the natural environment here. I've been working as a staff engineer for 15 years for the COGCC. And I've dealt with hydraulic fracturing before. So I want you to think of me and think of us as kind of the referee on the playing field. So if no one takes any more action, if fancy lawyers and these fine folk up here don't take any additional action, it's not as though the oil and gas companies can just come into Colorado and start doing whatever they want. There's already rules in place, and we stand behind those rules. We think they work very well. We've got a lot of experienced staff, myself among them, to make sure that, that these rules are upheld. They're very stringent, and we don't let any projects move forward unless they meet all the requirements. So just really quick, the four things we look at: there's the drill plan. We want to make sure that the plan itself, that the energy company goes ahead and implements, is the actual plan that they gave us. If they start drilling somewhere where they're not supposed to, then we kick them out. They're in trouble. Don't let that happen. We want to make sure that the cementing job is done well, so that none of the water carries the gas up and leaks it into the groundwater there. We've got to make sure that the company has a spill plan contingency in case anything goes wrong. And lastly, we want to make sure that they have a good plan to do with their wastewater, so it's disposed in the right ways. So I hope you do have questions, because like I said, think of us as a referee. We want to give you the information and let you know that things are going to be okay.
thank you very much. That's reassuring. Do we have any questions?
So in some of the other cities that have had a lot of oil and gas drilling and fracking work, can you share with us what's, in some of the worst case scenarios where even with all the process that COGCC has, there have been some disasters from an environmental point of view, with the floods and so on. My understanding is that some of these companies are really small, and they basically, when they're faced with a problem like that, they go bankrupt, and then the city is left with the cleanup and the cost of all of that. So,
Absolutely. If you don't mind craning your neck a little bit, maybe I'll just draw a quick picture of what one of these disaster situations, what went wrong, and how we're going to safeguard against that from now on. So you think of when you drill a hole here, you just got, the ground wants to close back up once you drill it open by inserting a pipe down inside here. And so the pipe keeps the ground open. And then when you create a fracture, then you're breaking into the ground and you're allowing the gas to flow up with the groundwater to the surface. Now what happens is, the gas in the groundwater can flow up the outside of this pipe. And if they do, well, the pipe goes to the surface, and there's nothing else coming out of the pipe except where it's supposed to come out at the top. But if water and gas flow up the outside, well, hey, when they get to the groundwater, there's nothing stopping them. They'll go right into the groundwater. Now that's happened on quite a few instances, and the issue there tends to be that the cement job, you're meant to put cement in between the pipe and the surface hole here, or the ground, it's called the annulus down here, to make sure that the only way that the gas can go up is up inside the pipe. So we have to make sure that none of that gas goes up the annulus. And that's something that we've had extensive experience with, and our team has never made a mistake in that regard. So this is the area where we are probably the most stringent of all the areas there, yeah.
Do you inspect that situation regularly?
So it's every time a well is drilled, we need, the process involves then the oil and gas company giving us the report on their cement job. And then we go ahead and look through the report and we make sure that it's up to our standards.
Would you say it's happened? There's been accidents before?
Yeah, it has happened before. I think the first case in Colorado, somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong here, was Arsenal. And it was so long ago that people didn't have a very good sense that this was even going to be an issue. The sense was that there's so much pressure downhole that the ground wants to collapse in and shut on this pipe. And so the only way that things can go is down and up the pipe rather than up the outside. So the cement job was, by today's standards, very low tech, and it wasn't given the priority that it should. Another thing that's happened more recently is when people frack too high up the cement. Let's say the top of the cement is right here in our little example. If people frack too high up the cement, then you can actually crumble the remaining cement even if you have a good cement job. So we've imposed restrictions that limit how far up towards the top of the cement job you're allowed to frack. So what that means is it's a little bit more expensive for the oil and gas company, but if they want to get gas up here, well then they're going to have to build their cement all the way up so that there's a reasonable gap here, so that the frac, when it happens, won't break up that remaining cement.
How can we be assured that they actually are doing what they're telling you they're doing?
Well, when we get a report, it's not just words on a page. It's they can run tools. The standard industry practices, they run tools down inside the hole and they pull them back out. So it's like lowering a bucket into a well. And the bucket has all kinds of fancy high-tech sensors on it, so when they pull it back up, it scans and it shows us the map of the cement. Now, if they were to give us, it's possible that an oil and gas company could commit fraud of some sort and change the report, but I don't think that's ever happened, and the consequences of that would be, I think no oil and gas company has ever been that dumb before, to my knowledge, hopefully. But it is possible that engineers can misread and misunderstand, or that the results can be inconclusive. So this is one of those areas where we're especially stringent. If the results seem inconclusive, if they're just one iota below our threshold, either they have to run it again or it's a no-go. And the entire well is not going to work.
Thank you.
I have another question. So we've heard a lot on the news about the state of Oklahoma and how they're having a lot of earthquake activity in areas that historically haven't had a lot of earthquakes. In this type of a scenario, if there was an earthquake, could that damage the cement seal and then cause system into the groundwater?
Absolutely, and earthquakes are actually a problem all on their own. So what tends to happen there is we like to think of the ground as being nice and solid and nothing can change with it. But if we think of like maybe this is the surface here, way down below you can have a situation where a nice big rock has a lot of pressure on it and wants to slide. And it's like when you balance a big rock on the edge of something, it can tip over. Even though it's a big rock, it can be hard to move around on its own. The same kind of thing can happen underground. So there's certain stress points down there, and if someone were to drill a well and do a hydraulic fracture right here on this stress point, we could actually trigger a large reaction. So it sounds scary, right? It sounds like, oh, maybe we shouldn't drill any wells underground anywhere. But it's actually not that difficult to determine where these areas are and to just eliminate them from the prospective hydraulic fracturing location. So that means that no well could do a hydraulic fracture here, and we're more reasonably certain that somewhere along here would be okay, or maybe somewhere else altogether. But the answer to your question is yes. If there were to be an earthquake, yeah, that would not only mess or cause trouble with the seal here, just like in the example up here where they frack too high on the cement job, but also just the scale of the earthquake might be bigger or big enough that it actually causes some damage on the surface.
And have you mapped the area on the west?
We have, yeah.
Do we have those sorts of fractures in the west?
Not under the Niobrara, no. We did have some in Arsenal, and I don't know if anyone else aside from me is old enough here to remember the Arsenal earthquakes, but they did have a few earthquakes, and they were very unprecedented, and they went away as soon as the fracturing stopped. And given that experience, we went back and looked at what the evidence was that would have given us a sense of how to determine ahead of time whether that earthquake would happen. And now that we have that information, we feel like we're well armed to make sure that nothing like that can happen here. And the results of our analysis show that no, there cannot be an earthquake under the Niobrara.
Thank you very much.
Oh, one more.
Yeah, 2 points of reference. One is in the cementing. Cementing is usually done not necessarily by the German company, by a subsidiary company like a Halliburton or somebody else. So the bond logs that you will be getting that show the cementing job are not just provided by the company itself, they're provided by a second company which regards or loosens the possibility of a fraudulent activity because there is a second company that is performing that function. And the second thing, I'm sure the state of Colorado requires freshwater zones and has identified the ones that need to be cemented off. So you know in advance which zones do contain fresh water, would be susceptible to possibly leakage, and those zones are defined beforehand as to the requirements as to cementing and covering those zones.
Absolutely, yeah. The fresh water is always going to be up higher. Making sure that we're not fracking where the fresh water is, I think that's definitely accounted for. And then the first issue, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, the cementing is usually done by a secondary company.
Yeah.
And so the chances of fraud or something are, because the bond logs that would cover those cementing would be provided by the second company who provided that service.
Yeah, I think it definitely raises the potential a little bit in terms of that kind of risk. That said, I think a lot of these contracts are more long-term. So it's not like a one-off contract with a little, mom and pop establishment just for one well. Instead, it's not even just for one field, it's for all of the company's activity. And so I think that kind of helps to reduce that risk somewhat, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. In the interest of time, we'll need to move on, but I do hope that you will stay around afterwards if our citizens have additional technical questions. We appreciate that. We need a representative from EPA. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, my name is Heather Felix. I'm from the EPA. Natural gas plays a key role in our nation's clean energy future. The U.S. has vast reserves of natural gas, including here in West Colorado. These are now viable as a result of advances in horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing technologies. Responsible development of West shale gas resources offers important economic, energy security, and environmental benefits. The EPA is working with the state of Colorado and all the key stakeholders here today to help ensure that natural gas extraction does not come at the expense of public health and the environment. Our focus and obligations under the law are to provide oversight, guidance, and where appropriate, rulemaking that achieve the best possible protections for the air, water, and land where Coloradans live, work, and play. Our concerns associated with overall natural gas and shale gas extraction include stress on surface water and groundwater supplies from withdrawal of large volumes of water that we use for the operations, contamination of underground sources of drinking water and surface waters, adverse impacts from surface water discharges as well as injection water disposal, and air pollution from VOCs, hazardous air pollutants, and greenhouse gases. We at the EPA target enforcement to ensure compliance with laws and regulations with an emphasis on correcting violations. We work with your state and local government to respond to incidents, encourage diligent accident prevention, and provide effective and prompt response when emergencies do occur here. At the EPA, we are aware of the controversies over federal involvement in the state regulatory matters. The EPA and the state of Colorado do share responsibility for implementing treatment and disposal of wastewater from shale gas extraction under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES. There currently exists an approved NPDES permit program and an approved general permits program in Colorado. In reference to the Safe Drinking Water Act's underground injection control, the Energy Policy Act of 2005 excluded hydraulic fracturing except when diesel fuels are used. However, the EPA has since developed a revised permitting guidance specific to oil and gas hydraulic fracturing. We continue to work with the state of Colorado and tribes who are responsible for ensuring permits and updating regulation for hydraulic fracturing. We know that they will find our recommendations useful in improving the protection of underground sources of drinking water and public health wherever hydraulic fracturing occurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Do we have any questions from our panel?
So, as I understand it, so does the EPA, am I understanding, does the EPA have some jurisdiction involving hydraulic fracturing and disposal of fluids?
So it really depends on, from the Safe Drinking Water Act, oil and gas operations fall under that. However, due to the Energy Policy Act of 2005, it exempted hydraulic fracturing. There's been a lot of public protests and a lot of concerns from the public about this, and so the EPA has gone and included recommendation and guidance for the use of diesel products with oil and gas, but it's not our jurisdiction to actually enforce permits or give permits and regulation. That's more of the states. But we are here as a guidance, and we've also been working on a study that we have our final publication coming out in 2012, where more details on it. We're undertaking a study to understand potential impacts of hydraulic fracturing on drinking water. We're reviewing published literature, analysis of existing data, scenario evaluation and modeling, laboratory studies, case studies, et cetera, and that's going to be coming out in 2014. But we work very closely with the state and the city in terms of regulation.
So from the point of view, if we do have problems with companies that do end up polluting our drinking water or causing air pollution, what is the EPA's role in punishing those companies or implementing fines?
So EPA is a federal agency. We also have a Colorado state agency that's responsible for all environmental regulations and matters, and we'll work closely with them. So typically you'll not only get audited by the state, but also at a federal level. And so you can have enforcement on either side to ensure compliance with any violators. And that's what the EPA is here for. We're going to provide guidance where permitting exists, but we don't want to exceed our reach in terms of state matters. But at the same time, we do have the ability to ensure compliance and enforcement.
You know, this has been controversial in other states, just the EPA's incursion into this whole area, and we would hate to see our regulatory infrastructure disturbed by just an extra layer of complexity. So we'd appreciate it if you would work closely with our regulators. In the interest of time, unless there's a pressing question, let's move on. Is there anyone else here in the audience that is speaking in a neutral position? Seeing none, let us move to the next group of voices. Thank you very much. And we're going to be hearing from those who are opposed to the concept of a ban. And I'd first like to hear from the oil company representative, who also happens to be the CEO, Mr. Hamza Al-Jaman. Welcome to West, Mr. Al-Jaman.
So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Hamza Al-Jaman, the CEO of an independent oil company. And we'd like your support to exploit this shale formation through hydraulically fracking and horizontal drilling this shale formation. So just to give you a brief history about our company, we've actually drilled and are currently operating several hundred wells in other shale formations and neighboring fields. So we have plenty of experience in this technology. In fact, we've started using this technology on conventional reservoirs, on the sandstone and carbonate formations before moving on to these shale formations. So looking at the bright side here, if we were to exploit this formation, we will end up paying county and city taxes. We will spend money in the city and county. So we're going to improve the infrastructure of the city by building hospitals, schools, and athletic fields. So we will also employ locals in the city as well. So shale gas development, if we look at the United States in general, by 2012, actually, there was an overall contribution to the US economy of about $238 billion. And if we look at these numbers as well, there was more than 1.7 million jobs created because of shale gas development. So if we zoom out here and we look at the big picture, we have actually a more frightening picture, because we have an increase in the population. By 2050, the population is expected to increase to about 9 to 10 billion people. So with this comes the responsibility of providing energy and meeting the demand for the increase in the standard of living occurring in the developing countries. So in fact, I would also like to share with you a fact about hydraulic fracturing. So according to Professor Mark Zobak, which happens to be here actually, he's a pioneer in shale gas development and a professor at the Department of Geophysics at Stanford. He mentions that hydraulic fracturing causes very small micro earthquakes in the magnitude of -1 to -3. So what do these numbers mean? -1 to -3 is an energy equivalent to a gallon of milk falling off a kitchen counter. So these are the type of microseismic events that could happen from hydraulic fracking. And our senior engineer, Arhoon, will talk more about the consequences of hydraulic fracking and our plan and design for this process. So thank you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I have a question. You're in charge of the leasing. Your company is taking the leasing. I'm very curious to know, in West and in the area you're leasing, what percentage of the minerals have been separated from land ownership? I'd like to have an idea of how much of the revenue ultimately will be coming back to citizens of West versus going to places where other funds may own the minerals in Houston or in Dallas or in New York. So how much of a revenue involvement are we really going to have in our community, not just in the factor of the taxation, but in factor of income coming from the revenue of the producing minerals?
So we're still in the process of negotiating this royalty interest with the mineral owners. So we have offers ranging from about 5 to 10% of gross income. So these are the numbers that we're looking at.
Well, I think the community should be informed at least as to what potential revenue stream will be coming back into the community. That's very, very important to us.
mentioned jobs. What kind of jobs would you be creating in our city?
So, as I mentioned before, not only are we looking to create jobs in the oil and gas industry, because we also plan on improving the infrastructure of the city. So by building schools, hospitals, facilities, so we're looking at a variety of job offers.
Well, excuse me, but do you plan to build hospitals?
So yeah, if you're gonna end up creating a multi-billion-dollar business here, we need an infrastructure to support this business. So definitely the plan is to support somehow or another the creation of facilities such as hospitals and education systems that will be able to support the families and the employees.
And do you plan to make these facilities available to the local citizenry?
Definitely, yes.
So we have a process here in Arapahoe County where we have a county hospital system
Okay.
and we have a long-range planning process. Have you been involved or have you contacted any of the county hospital administrators?
We're still looking into that. We still haven't finalized the plan, but yeah, it's something that we're
I would recommend that you meet with them very, very quickly because they're
Okay.
struggling with some financial burdens right now and trying to plan for their 2025 planning horizon.
Okay.
It would be helpful for them to know if you could partner.
The quantity of wells that you are potentially going to be drilling here, are you looking at a pad facility where the rig could be moved and you would have one central drilling location that possibly could do maybe 10 wells, or are you looking at individual locations at this time to drill the wells?
You would definitely need a pad to drill several wells at a time. As you know, like shale formations differ quite significantly to conventional wells, where drilling one well is not enough to produce reasonable well rates. So with that comes like high drilling activities. So we're going to be drilling about 100 wells a year.
And how many pads do you anticipate would be within the city limits of West?
This is something that we have not finalized yet. Maybe our senior engineer here can talk more about it.
I would just thank you very much.
You're welcome.
In the interest of time, we had allocated an hour and a half, and as in all public hearings, they tend to go long, and it's unexpected. There's a lot more questions. So with your forbearance, we would like to continue. Does anyone have a concern about that? Okay, does anyone have any time constraints where we might need to go outside of our order? Anybody that's planning to testify that has a time constraint? Raise your hand. No one that's planning to testify. You do?
I do, but no, I'm not going to see that.
Okay, let us know because we want to make sure we hear from you. And let us hear now from Mr. Is it Iden? Thank you very much. You know, while he's teeing this up, this is quite realistic in a public hearing. In fact, there's many strategies that often happen in these hearings where the person that's running the hearing might wait until the very last to have something extremely controversial, knowing that the audience will thin, so that you get the information that might be the most challenging to deal with. I've seen situations where the actual person holding the hearing will make a CEO come back 3 and 4 and 5 times as a power play to show kind of who's in charge of the city. So there's a lot of tricks that occur. Yes?
Yeah, Nancy, I'm interested, Alan, why you didn't try to force the CEO to answer the question you asked rather than one he wanted to answer.
I mean,
Just for that reason.
About the minerals?
Yeah,
Aspect.
about split ownership.
Well, the point is basically just to bring up that as a subject here. I'm not trying to be controversial, it's just that is an important subject as to revenue that's coming into the community and revenue that's going outside. And I
But
think it's
Nancy,
something
isn't it
we should
realistic
consider.
that in a city council environment,
Sure.
when somebody deflects, and a well-trained executive knows how to do that, but then it's the job of the city council people to force them to answer the question.
Absolutely. And this issue is going to become huge when we get into the mineral owners in the city. who's going to make money and who's going to actually lose their quality of life. So with no further ado, and we're going to have to ask you to trim your comments down by a minute because we're constrained on time. That's also very realistic. It happens all the time in these hearings.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm the chief engineer for the oil company, and I just want to talk a little bit about what we are planning to do, some of your concerns, and I would like to talk in a manner that the town people will also understand what we want to do in this field. So first of all, this is a picture of what you're probably worried about. So we have a drill target, and you also have the water that you're drinking right now. What you might be worried about would be when we drill our well, we may fracture it so that the formation and your drinking water is connected. When that happens, you have contamination. Well, actually, the geology shows us that the picture here doesn't really look like that. The picture here looks something more like that. There's a big separation between what we're after and where you're drinking your water from. So that's one. And the fractures that we're planning are not going to be 7,000 feet long, because if we do that, that would be a record to start with. It's going to be far away from the water that you're using. So that's one of the worries that you might have, and that's one answer that we have. We've also compiled some previous incidents from border states as well, including Colorado, and three incidents that were reported by people, 2001, 2007, and 2010. All of them are close counties to West County, Stilt County, Fernando County, and Las Animas County. Two of the first two are equipment failures, which we are not foreseeing to have because we are not planning to transport any equipment from our pre-existing fields. We are planning to start with brand new equipment in this field, so we don't expect any wear and tear problems, just like in the first two cases. The third case is mainly due to the misuse of chemicals. And if you ask what those chemicals are, so this is the chemical composition of the used water. So very shortly.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to give this gentleman a little more time. This is interesting.
Yeah, this is important.
So
Thank you.
very shortly, we have some amount of, the most of it, the big blue part you see is water. It's 97% water that we are injecting. That little percent, the orange part, which is about 10%, is the proppant, which is sand particles that stay down there and that will not be in your water anyway. The only thing that can go into your water is that small fragment right here. And that small fragment, when we enlarge it, it has a lot of components, chemical components, such as bacterides, fracture reducers, and most importantly, surfactants. So you may not be familiar with these terms. You don't know what these terms are. Well, this is what they are. They are used in swimming pools. They are used in dental disinfectants, bleaching hair, laundry detergents. So this slide is not here to say that, oh, it is just antifreeze, you can drink it. What we are trying to say is these are chemicals that we know how to work with. So by taking precautions and by following step-by-step procedure, this main handling of chemicals can be done adequately as well. And that's pretty much what I have to say. So if you have any questions about how we're going to do what we're about to do, I'll be glad to answer that.
So look at those chemicals, those don't seem terribly toxic to me. I mean, like you say, you don't want to drink them, but they don't look like they're going to cause cancer or anything.
First of all, they are very diluted. They are in, you can think of them as parts per million compared to what we are injecting. And secondly, as you can see in this picture, they are far away from drinking water. And by no means we are not going to have any of these being transported 6,700 feet up to the aquifer where people are using their water.
I have a question about if, perchance, our water was contaminated, a mistake, an accident, a casing failure, whatever. What sort of procedure do you have to make sure that our citizens aren't inconvenienced, their health is not compromised? Are you going to bring in fresh water supplies, and not only for individuals but also for their livestock?
That's a good question. The first line of action will be shut off the well and circulate out whatever is in the well and plug the well for the time being. And that will basically stop injecting more and more chemicals into the water that we have, so that will stop worsening the situation. After we have done that, we probably will drill control wells, shallow control wells, and have a feel of the extent of the spread. And if the water here is totally not usable, and if the chemical amounts are above the limits that cannot be served or extracted by chemical means at the surface by surface facilities, then we will transport fresh water. And that would be an ideal that we're going to make the economy as well.
Well, this is a huge issue to us.
Right.
Because the last thing that we want is any one citizen not being able to turn on their tap and being able to have a glass of fresh, clean water coming out of their tap. And if there's any interruption in that, we want to make sure that you are proactive and that you're contacting us. I don't want to have to call you.
No, that's fair. And also, since we are not going to use fresh water over and over again, we are going to have a closed loop of water that we use for fracking. At some point, we'll have mechanisms to extract these chemicals from the water that we have used and put it back in so that we can continue our closed loop fracking. That's why we can use the same technology on some of the wells that we are going to drill to the aquifer to ensure that there will always be clean and filtered water for people to use in case the fresh water from somewhere else doesn't reach the city.
What happens though, how are you going to know when the citizens are having complaints? Because they're going to call the city public works director. Okay, so how are we going to get in touch with you all? Will you have a 24-hour hotline? Will you have someone that's in our community who can respond to that immediately? Do you have freshwater sources that are available 24/7? I mean, I'm concerned about the practicality of how you're going to operate.
In terms of getting information from citizens, we're definitely going to have a hotline that will be available for whenever they call, because people use water 24/7, and we will work with that. That's one. And in order to, as I said, first we are thinking about drilling wells directly into the aquifer, our own wells and our own purification systems, and taking care of contamination, to clean up contamination, and give out this water to citizens free of charge. And also we will have a backup supply of water, which is going to come before we start the process. Right now we are still in the process of negotiating to find someone to supply this fresh water, so that we'll have a backup for our plan A.
What would be very helpful for this community is before you commence any sort of drilling, any sort of significant activity, we would like for you to have this conversation directly with our citizens.
Right.
And make sure that they understand what the procedure is, and make sure that there's a live operator for a 1-800 24/7 number.
I mean, we'll definitely, those are kind of things that we are going to work out before we start operations, as you said, because we're going to have a plan A, maybe all the way up to plan Z, to follow in case something like that happens. But as our CEO has alluded to, we are planning to operate in West County not because it's the most profitable, but it is the safest place that we can operate as well.
Thank you very much.
And just one point. Historically, most of the contamination problems have come from surface water and flow back of the water on the surface. Are you planning any other monitoring facilities, separate monitoring facilities, just to observe those areas as far as the surface flow back, etc.?
Right. We are going to observe surface flow back. That's one of the things. And in order not to have any unforeseen leakages in the system, we are going to make sure that we are going to use the needed corrosive inhibitors in the system, so that they will be flowing with this propellant, and they will ensure that the pipes that we are using that are connecting the equipment in the surface to the underground will not be corroded in the process of injecting and re-injecting.
Mayor, I think we need to move on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We have a number of other testifiers. We're sorry we're going to have to limit comments to 2 minutes apiece. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Spencer Malin with the Chamber of Commerce for West. I'd say my focus here is the interest in our local community's job growth and protecting the interest of our local economy. I don't think really anybody can debate the fact that, especially in the short term and the near term, we're going to have a huge explosion of people that are living here in our town, and not only being employed by the companies that are going to, if they do come in and extract our oil and gas resources, they would also be engaging in the service industries that we have, such as just our general stores, if you stay in our hotels, eating in our restaurants, and spending all of this money, which would then impact many of you who have nothing to do with energy at all, or may not even be leasing your land to these oil companies. However, my concerns go beyond just the short term, and I do see my job as a responsibility and dedication to the long-term growth economically of the town of West. And so it's very important to me to ensure that we provide a framework so we're not just become another one of these bus towns, and that we have some sort of plan in place to build up a long-term infrastructure. I've been very pleased to work with the oil company CEO that you heard earlier. You can tell from his attitude he's very enthusiastic about supporting the town of West and donating to things such as our local hospitals, which are in dire need of repair. Two of the things I noticed that tend to be common problems with fracking operations is damage to roads and the infrastructure. And we are a town that's very rural community, has very small roads, and they take about 500 truck trips per well if they use fresh water. However, as the oil company engineer Orhan spoke earlier, he plans to recycle that water. That is a viable option. It's in operation in Colorado right now with a company called Energy Water Solutions. So, you want to finish?
Thank you. We need to stop in the interest of time. Is there just one final comment you'd like to make to wrap up your prepared remarks? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That's
Any
it.
other questions? Okay.
And I'm in support of increased fracking and drilling in the city. I know that this might have an impact on the quality of life, of my life as well as you, but I think that the oil and gas industry has been a part of the American life for over 100 years, so I'm not too worried about this. And also the engineer of the oil company made a good case that the drilling is not going to contaminate the drinking water of the town. So that's good to hear. The reason I'm in support of fracking is because I think the drilling will lead to a lot of new jobs, and this would also lead to an increase in disposable income and an increase in income for my own business. So that's the reason why I'm in support of this fracking. So with that, I recommend the council to reject that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we have our next individual that would like to testify.
That is so cool.
Hi everyone, my name is Chuan Tian. I'm a representative of the local labor union, as you might tell from my address. And I fully support the hydrofrac project going to be in our city. And I have 3 reasons for that. So first of all, the hydraulic fracturing will create jobs for our city. Critical infrastructures are in urgent need for hydraulic fracturing, like roads, pipelines, and water supplies. This will bring more employment opportunities for our city. And secondly, the project will expand the local economy. It attracts investment and also immigration, which will stimulate the development of related industry as well as retailers. And lastly, we've seen the economic development of our neighbors, all in other places in our Arapahoe County. And due to shale boom, people there, they enjoy a higher salary and also better welfare. And why do we do that? So, my dear friends, please make your voice heard by joining local working families in supporting this fracturing project. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming out.
Nancy,
Yes.
yeah, you want to put the names back?
Yes, I am.
Try to get the names back.
Do we have any other testifiers that are here? Okay, we have industrial business, biofuels. Anybody, who are you representing?
I'm the local rancher.
The local rancher, with
Yes.
minerals. Okay, come on,
Yes.
come on up.
How are you doing? I don't see you outside of campaign fundraiser events.
Well, it's that time of year.
Oh, good. So you're going to be seeing your granddaddy again, huh?
Absolutely.
Good. As all of you know, I'm ERE Satija. My family has been raising the best quality all-natural Colorado beef on this land for 5 generations. I'm in the unique position of standing to profit from the natural gas drilling in town, as well as being exposed to the risks of my water and my cattle being contaminated with poisonous chemicals. We've all seen documentary films, we've all seen the news reports. There are cases across the nation where hydraulic fracturing has allegedly, caused people's water supply to be contaminated with all sorts of chemicals, from what gets injected into the ground because of leaching, the air being contaminated with vapors from volatile chemicals that sit in condenser tanks, and the produced water that lies around in open pits. I've lived here all my life. 30 years ago, I used to haul meat and milk into the next town on a dirt road. I've seen in my lifetime young folks being upping and leaving this town in search of jobs and economic opportunity. 4 of my sons, 3 of the neighbors, all of them left. Where'd they go? Upstate New York and North Dakota. If we can recreate here what has already happened in upstate New York without people's water faucets catching fire or people and animals getting sick, I, for one, really look forward to welcoming the hydraulic fracturing wells in my backyard. They'll come with good roads, good jobs. The young men and women who will come here from elsewhere to stimulate gas wells will also be stimulating local businesses, hairdressers, dry cleaners, restaurants, cinemas. And that's what we need right now. I recognize that we are the custodians of this land, this water, this air, but I do not intend to be unreasonable and charge the companies with ruining our way of life. We changed our way of life when we got ourselves smartphones. Whether it's for better or for worse is something we don't know. What we know is that we have this valuable resource under our land. We know that we can profitably extract it, and we know that it will help us meet challenges that face all of humanity, something that cannot be done using alternative sources of energy. The state has no business being an obstacle in this matter. Instead, a balance must be found between profit and sustainability, and this balance is your job as the council.
Thank you very much. We so appreciate the passion with which you have expressed your opinions. We appreciate that so much, and we hope that you will be around afterwards so that we can ask you additional questions if necessary.
Sure.
And let's move on to the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. This is a very important voice that we need to hear from with the industry. Mr. Calkins.
Thank you guys for having me speak today. So my name is Jory Calkins, and I am playing the role of the representative from COGA, the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. And I represent the hardworking men and women who develop energy for our state of Colorado and for our country that you and I and everyone else relies on every single day. I represent folks like your neighbor who is working his tail off to make ends meet. I represent folks like your mother and father who put food on your plate and built a roof over your head. And I represent folks like your sons and your daughters who are struggling to secure the future of themselves and your grandchildren and the future of your family. We understand your concerns, and we want to let you know 3 things, and would like to discuss 3 things with you. The first is that when done properly, fracking is safe and can be safe. The second is that it's an opportunity that we can't afford to miss, like my friend and buddy Addie told you. And the third is we want to engage with on this with you and work together. On the first point, fracking can be done safely. Fracking's been done for over 60 years. It's a highly regulated industry, but there are risks, and we need to work together diligently to address them all. On the second point, it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. In Colorado, the industry employs over 51,000 people, and each one of those people is making 50% more than the average other employed person in Colorado. In Colorado, the industry pays
We're sorry.
a lot of money to folks like yourselves, and we want to work together. Frac Focus, a lot of folks work together, or a lot of information was disclosed. So from me, your neighbor, and your parents and future children, let's talk about this and work together.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you for being here. We really do welcome you to our community. But as the mayor of this town, I just have to say we do not appreciate COGA's opposition to cities that have chosen to pass bans. And that has created some unnecessary litigation. And so we'd like to know how we might work with you on resolving the issues as they come up in our community, because we don't want to see you in the courthouse.
We agree. I think the issues with those towns is that we weren't able to have an open and constructive dialogue with them.
And why is that?
I think we tried, and there were interests in those communities who weren't willing to engage with us. We want to engage in having a constructive dialogue, and we're open to that.
Wonderful. Well, we would like and welcome that as we move forward. Okay, any other voices in opposition to a proposed ban? Okay, seeing none, let's move to those who are supportive. Kate Malcolm with an environmental organization. Welcome, Kate. And then after her, we will have the Arapaho Nation Chief Executive, and then a farmer and rancher without minerals, and finally a homeowner. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Well, hello, and thank you very much for having me here this evening. My name is Kate Malcolm, and I'm a representative from the Colorado Association of Concerned Environmentalists. I'm here this evening to make the case against hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, because of the significant threat that it poses to the environment. To begin with, fracking is extremely harmful to freshwater supplies. It has been proven that methane concentrations are 17 times higher in drinking water from wells near fracturing sites than in normal wells. Additionally, there have been over 1,000 documented cases of water contamination next to areas of gas drilling. There have also been many cases of sensory, respiratory, and neurological damage to people that have ingested water contaminated by the fracking process. The toxic chemicals used in fracking fluid are also a large environmental hazard, as these toxins are readily released into the ground with little or no restrictions. Up to 600 chemicals are used in the fracking fluid, including many acids, bases, chemicals used in pesticides, and cleaning detergents, which we definitely do not want into the ground or into our drinking water. Approximately 40,000 gallons of chemicals are used in the fracturing process, and 50 to 70% of the fracking fluid is left in the ground. Even the fracking fluid that is pumped back up to the surface is left in open-air pits to evaporate, releasing harmful volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere, contaminating the air and creating acid rain and ground-level ozone. Not only does fracking contaminate the water, but also depletes precious freshwater supplies. It takes anywhere from 1 to 8 million gallons of water to complete each fracturing job. In summary, bringing fracking to the town of West will lead to contaminated freshwater supplies, toxins being released into the ground and air, and a huge depletion of fresh water, all of which have serious consequences on the environment and the citizens of West.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have just a quick question. The oil company engineer showed us a list of the chemicals that they were going to use in the fracking process. They didn't seem very harmful to me. Are they doing something different maybe than
I
other
do
people?
realize that. No, I have looked at the chemicals and they do come from similar sources, but even stuff that seems like pretty benign, like stuff that's in liquid detergent, antifreeze, it's still not good to consume it in water. And over time, even though the amounts that are in your water may be very little, over time, some of those chemicals can build up in your system and definitely cause damage.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Holman.
Thank you.
And Chief Seeloff.
Oh, the chief. Actually, my name is Clearwater Blue Skies.
Clearwater Blue Skies.
I represent the Arapaho Nation, which is a large tribe that occupies most of northern Colorado. In fact, our reservation is not too far from here, and several of our tribe members live in the community. And we, of course, have heard testimony from people who tell us that there are going to be more jobs available in the area. That would be a really important thing to us, because unemployment among our tribe is pretty high. We would be interested in anything that brings more jobs. We have some other concerns. So it turns out that some of the areas surrounding the city of West contain tribal artifacts, archaeological spots, and we're a bit concerned about these operations. If they are disturbing the land and disturbing our ancestors, it would be a great concern to us. So we would want to make sure that the oil company doesn't do anything to disturb our native heritage, and we would want to see any plan that they have before they actually enter onto these lands. And if they intend to drill in a spot that we deem important, then maybe they should move their drilling. Anyway, that's all I have to say after the trial.
Well, we would just like to say on behalf of the City of West, we recognize that you were here first, and that these are sacred lands to you, and we value our very, very cordial relationship, and we appreciate the ways you've worked with us over the years. And I'd just like to say to any energy company that's interested in drilling a well within the city limits of our city, we expect for you to extend a tremendous amount of respect to this tribe. This is an important part of our Colorado heritage, and we thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Ganesh?
Hi, y'all. So, Mayor, I'm not the only loud voice around here. But let me tell you, I had this entire speech prepared, but all of you talking have got me so agitated, I'm just going to talk about what your points were and how all of them are wrong. You know, I've been here for many decades now. I've been here, I grew up here, I was born here, I helped build this place. Yes, Mr. Addy was here as well. Yes, Mr. Anirudh Reddy was here as well. All our supermarket owners. I mean, Addy, you live only like a few streets down from me. But my point is that all of these people have business concerns. I lived here, I have my own cattle, I have my own livestock. And to me, nothing's more important than the way of life here. I don't have any business interests here. I want to see the people living happily. So I want to go down straight to what Mr. Walker and Ms. Skinner were talking about in terms of how they're improving the progress. Well, let me tell you one thing. Ohio had 37 accounts of groundwater complaints about fracking in 2010. It went up to 54 in 2011. Then it went to 59 in 2012. It's increasing. Why? Why is it increasing? I mean, you tell me you're making all these different things, all these improvements in technology, but yet the complaints just keep rising. And the other thing is, we're talking about parts per million inside our water resources. Yes, maybe there's like a 0.1% chance of this occurring, but 0.1%, that's 1 in 10,000 people. Why don't we go out to the streets of Colorado? Why don't we go out to the streets of West and ask 10,000 people if one of them are willing to volunteer getting sick over the next year? Let's see who volunteers. Now we're talking about the way of life. You talk about economic progress and all that. But Mr. Manley here, I mean, he wants to be one of us. But he didn't really talk about the aging population here, did he? How's he going to help us? I mean, Mr. Reddy and Mr. Satya have economic concerns. But what I'm saying is that, Mr. Court, you came here. You came here for the rural setting here. You didn't come here because you wanted city life. You could go to Denver for the city life. So what I'm saying is that we have other opportunities like the tourism center. We have the biofuel company. And I think you will remember that your citizens are important for this coming November.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner. We certainly appreciate the passion that you bring not only to this topic, but to this community. You are a valuable member of this community. I'd like to ask you a question. I understand your opposition, but would you be willing to take on an increased tax burden to pay for the sort of infrastructure that we're going to need in our 2025 plan?
Ms. Mayor, is this sort of like a trick question? I mean, who wants to pay more taxes for this kind of program? I mean, I kind of just listed out how we have alternatives, we have the biofuel company, we have the whole tourism center idea, we can improve the economics in so many other ways that doesn't require us to have groundwater contamination, all the other problems that the environmental organization we're talking about, and we don't have to increase taxes about. I mean, definitely, I think we have other revenues than just fracking.
Thank you very much. And we have one last homeowner that will be speaking. And is there anyone else that would like to testify? Yes, thank you so much. You'll be the last one.
Prepare the anger in me. I want to say today that we have two loud sounds than the opposites. Yeah. I want to say that I lived here for more than 30 years, and I love this place as much as Janice did. And I want to say this is a beautiful place. It's quiet, beautiful nature, and we enjoy this so much. And all of this is probably going to be destroyed by those bad oil company guys. They want to earn money there, and 80, you have mineral rights here, so you want it, I understand, but that's not only about money. There is possible issues about contaminated water. It has been reported a lot of places. We have to face the fact. As what he said, even though there is only 1% probability, we should avoid it. Because it's not just about ourselves, it's about our next generation. It's about our kids, it's about the future. And I've read a study that there is like 30 or 70% of the water that injected underground may go back to surface in the future. So that's really a serious issue. If the oil company cannot guarantee there's zero probability that those stuff will not contaminate the water or be bad to people's health, I won't accept that you go here to do this hydraulic fracturing. I was really scared about this stuff. My family did, my kids did, and we don't want it to happen to me. It happens somewhere in Illinois, in Pennsylvania. A lot of people do that activities against those stuff online. We don't want it to happen here. I want to be safe, and I want my kids, my future and next generation, all the people here to be safe.
Thank you very much.
To keep calling out, that's what I want to say. Agricultural activity is the single largest contaminant to oil, to land, water, and air. We do not ban agricultural activity.
I appreciate your passion. And
You are wrong.
I need a sergeant at arms. Thank you very much. And you know, it's homeowners that make this community what it is and what's valuable to us, and we so appreciate your perspective.
I have the right to vote, right?
You absolutely do. And so our final individual who will testify, and then for those of you that would like to stay, I believe City Council would be willing to answer any of your individual questions afterwards. Please conclude our panel. And I just want to thank all of you all that have taken the time to come out tonight.
Hi there, my name is Joel Miner. I'm not in the class or whatever that organized this, but I'm actually from Lafayette, Colorado, but one of those towns that was highlighted earlier. We don't have southern accents, actually, and we tend to be pretty soft-spoken, but I did have a couple things I wanted to raise that really haven't come up yet. The first thing involves taxes and revenues. So the fact is that the property tax base gets lowered in towns like Lafayette and probably towns like West, because the only properties that actually have new assessments that determine what their tax base is going to be are those properties that people are trying to sell. What happens is when people are trying to sell their property, when there is this activity going on nearby, their property assessment goes down. So property taxes, which are actually the main source of revenue for the town, basically goes down, and that means that we don't have much money to pay for things. We sometimes see small increases in sales taxes, but those aren't necessarily within the city of West. They might go to businesses within Arapahoe County, and they're going to be wherever is closest to where the workers are working. That's probably going to be a little bit outside of town. At least that was the case for us in Lafayette. But we need revenue. We need those taxes to actually pay for things. The main thing is actually road damage. That came up in your PowerPoint presentation, but no one else has really mentioned it. And the fact is that when you have something like 2,000 to 3,000 truck trips per well, that really destroys our roads. They probably were dirt a few years ago, and the reality is we don't have the money to put in an entire new road system after all those trucks have destroyed them and they go away and we're left with less taxes. The other thing is health and emergency services for workers. You brought up man camps, and the reality is that most of the workers are living in sort of squalid conditions. They live in small man camps. You'll have 5 or 6 people crammed into a single wide trailer, maybe even an RV, people living in their trucks because there's just nowhere for them to live. We don't have a lot of hotels or rental properties available in small towns like West Colorado or even in Lafayette, which is a little bit bigger. Those conditions aren't great. The rates of alcohol and substance abuse are very, very high. There tends to be very high rates of crime associated with that. And that means that the city of West actually has to provide emergency services to respond to it when there's something like an overdose or a fight. We also need to start providing long-term health services like mental health and addiction counseling for those workers. And that's another source of revenue that we just don't have. The third thing is I know a lot about these because my dad was what we call a roughneck. He's someone who works on these wells. Those workers are not unionized. They are coming in from somewhere else. They're not going to be hiring their children. They're going to be hiring someone who comes in from far away because they're going to be moving along in a couple weeks after they're building. So those are some reasons that we in Lafayette are concerned.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Well, citizens of West, it's been a long evening. My apologies for it going over time, but I feel like that it was valuable to hear from all of you. And let's just take a quick vote right now, and this is just a straw poll, but if you were to recommend to us whether we should vote for a ban or oppose a ban, how many would vote in favor of a ban? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in favor of a ban. How many would vote in opposition to a ban? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposition wins.
I think there are only 4 speakers.
It's close. It's close. I know that each one of us have a perspective, but I would just like to say from my perspective, you all did a really excellent job of framing up the issue. I know that Dr. Court has helped you and has worked with you for 2 different sessions, but you really did a wonderful job, and the passion that you brought to your roles was much appreciated. I would say the real situation, often what happens is that there's a lot more bad science that's out there. We saw a little bit of that going on here tonight, and that would be an issue that the City Council would have to struggle with. And, Alan, how?
I think you did a very good job. I would just say that there is a tendency now in many of these areas to sit down and start talking between each others. A lot of these points related to pollution, a lot of these points on roads are being worked out, and people are talking about them. And if you have the movable rigs, you don't need to have as many locations all over the place. You have one single location where they're doing multiple drilling. So I think this is a very changing and flexible business. And I think the aspect that more people are together trying to visit and work together doesn't mean all the problems are going to be find solutions, but at least it means that there are many of these points that you bring up on pollution and other things that are being worked at and are being approached and can be handled. So I think it's important that you have these dialogues that begin almost immediately in these communities to try and work this out. There are economic issues that are not going to be resolved, but essentially many of these individual issues, the dialogue is important to start soon before you get a lot of these personalities involved, etc.
I just want to reiterate what Nancy said. We were really impressed with the research that people put into their different roles and how you delivered the information, and just the respectfulness with which you interacted with the whole group. I think that's a big part of what Warren is really interested in, is promoting conversation and getting people to listen to different points of view. They may not agree, but at least they respect the information that's coming to the table.
I've been to a lot of these meetings, real meetings, about this thing, and I'll have to say you guys are among the most sophisticated audience that we've had. It's really distressing to see how people in real life, how inaccurate they are, how full of misinformation, how rude they are to one another, stuff like that. If all meetings for this kind of matter would be like this, we'd be making a lot of progress. Thanks so much for coming out.
it's fun. We're going to have a film. Eventually, you guys can look and see what you. Okay, see you in class.
Thank you very much. Good job.